Call this regular City Council meeting to order on Monday, December 16th, 2019 at 7:05 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Horn?
Present.
Mr. Bateman?
Present.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Present.
Mr. Welch?
Present.
Mr. Perry?
Present.
Mr. Downs?
Present.
Mr. Keller?
Present.
Mr. Haneke?
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have anyone that would like to speak under public participation? Okay, moving down to the consent agenda, we have the payment of bills as well as the approval of the closing of City Hall, Municipal Services Building, and other city offices on Christmas Eve, Tuesday, December 24th, 2019.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion. Mr. Parrott seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Abstain.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Moving down to ordinances.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Sorry, Tracy. Moving down to ordinance and resolution, we have the ordinance amending section 6-4-24 of the city code pertaining to the proper possession and use of legally acquired cannabis.
I'll make a motion to accept it as presented.
Second.
Mr. Bateman made the motion. Mr. Welch seconded. Discussion? Mr. Ablett?
What we have here, or what is created, has been a collaboration work between I and the city police chief. The recent draft that you guys have in front of you now, the changes that were promulgated that were not within there previously, there has been a removal of any reference to cannabis paraphernalia as it exists, since there has been changes to the law that essentially removes cannabis paraphernalia. We added a section, a new subsection C, within this particular avenue, within this particular city code here, that essentially outlines use of cannabis or use of previously what is still rendered unlawful cannabis. Previously, our city code provided for possession of cannabis, given the fact that we might see a situation where people are using cannabis in public places when they should not. There should be a stipulation that provides relief for the city to find said individuals. We also added I added a definition for public place up within the definition section. I moved all the, because I added a new subsection C, I moved all the remaining letters down one. I adjusted the penalties to reflect the new lettering and numbering, and I angled the language a bit in regards to the subsection K, the new subsection K, the exceptions for legally acquired cannabis. Previous meeting indicated that some of the council members wanted to change from one's own home to residence or housing of that nature, so I reflected that change as well within there, I believe. So as it stands, this is essentially what we're looking at. I believe it would provide for the cities in order to reflect what is essentially becoming legal and how the law is changing effective January 1st, 2020, while still possessing a means of relief for people who essentially disobey said ordinances of the city. So, if there are any questions, I could.
Mr. Parrott?
So on the fines, are they reflective of the county or what we have for, what we currently used for liquor?
The fines that we have right now are essentially the fines that we have already in place for cannabis. So essentially, I use those as a metric. If you guys want to increase the fines, you can always amend the ordinance to increase or amend what's on here now to try to increase those. But in essence, I keep the fines the same. That being, if you look down to subsection L, penalties, it used to be previously to my submitted ordinance, there was a differentiation between drug paraphernalia with cannabis and drug paraphernalia without cannabis, because there's no more really a avenue for relief for drug paraphernalia for cannabis. I removed that and added subsection C and subsection D, which dealt with the possession of cannabis previously. And that has an outlined fine of $250 with a maximum fine of the $500. Part 2 of subsection L gets to the higher fines. And to be honest, if somebody is violent, I mean, the fines are there as an avenue of relief for officers, but for argument purposes, if someone's being if they do not wish to go that route, but realistically, likely to be a criminal charge in lieu of an ordinance violation.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
We have item D under new business communications that actually we're going to move up to the ordinance or resolution. So we have the approval of tax levy for tax year 2019.
Move to approve.
Second.
Jeff made the motion, Tracy seconded. Mr. Gonzo, did you?
Yes, just to kind of reiterate what I said before, there'll be a decrease in the bond levy, the GO bond retirement fund, from what was originally proposed, $178,045, which was down from $178,625 the previous year. And that will decrease still further by another $56 to $177,989. Leaves us a difference of $56, which, if it pleases the council, I would recommend adding that to the Fireman's Pension Fund, adding that to that $456,275, and that would keep the total levy the same at $1,795,846. I know this was discussed in 2 committee of the whole meetings. Consensus appeared to be an increase of 1%, which is what we see in this levy. Very, very small, particularly in comparison to a lot of other taxing districts in the state, both in this county and outside of the county.
Any questions or discussion? Mr. Keller.
Thank you, Mayor. So, in checking this out, I was a bit curious about how the new Illinois pension consolidation bill would affect us, if it would affect us at all. So I had a conversation today with State Representative Tim Butler, and then also contacted the Illinois Municipal League about it. The governor is due to sign this probably this week, and what it will do essentially, as many of you may know, that it pools the pension funds for 650 downstate pension and police and fire pensions. It does not affect Chicago, and apparently there's an asset of $8.7 billion, which the goal is to make this similar to the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, where all the retirement funds are pooled together to make it a greater to get a greater rate of return. And to maybe hopefully alleviate some pressure on local municipalities such as us. And so I talked with him about how that would work and what projections we see. And of course, it all depends upon the market. And if it affects us, it probably wouldn't affect us for several years down the road. Interesting enough, one question I did ask, is this protected by the state? And apparently there is what's called no fund sweeps, which means the state can't come in, swoop in, and use this money for some other purpose, which is good to know. And so, anyway, that's due to be set up. Again, as I said, the governor is due to sign it this week, and we'll see how that goes and see how that affects us in future years.
Mr. Bateman.
I said it a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to say it again. I'm voting no for this. I don't believe in a 1% increase in the tax levy. And I also don't believe in constantly using the pensions as the reason to raise taxes or revenues or such. We passed a utility tax on the citizens without any input from the citizens, and we use the pensions as the reasoning behind it, and then we're only, I believe it's 10%, 30% of that burden that we've put on the citizens. If pensions are such a problem, why did we sell it on the back of the pension problem and then turn around and only use 30% of that money? So I'm just going to vote no, because if we really want to get serious about pensions, we should start tightening our belts, get serious about pensions, moving some of that utility tax money to the pension fund, and then work at changing the pension system so that it's not such a burden on the city. At one point, it's got to change. We're just chasing snowballs down a hill here. That's the way I feel about it.
Mr. Conzo?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, thank you, Alderman Keller, for that additional information regarding the consolidation. And I think that's real good information to have. I know we touched on some of those things before, but that helps to provide some additional information. And one thing I would add to that, and Alderman Keller did point this out, this is going to be phased in over several years, so we're still going to have to come up with money to finance even after it's done, we're going to have to come up with money to fund the pensions. We are in better position than some places, and we're in worse position than a lot of others. This is going to combine it, all into one fund. We'll still be required to put in a certain amount of money, and that'll be calculated like it is for the IMRF, except this will be a different fund. And we don't know what those numbers are going to look like, but we know it's almost certain that it's going to go up. As far as finding any long-term solution to this, this is all governed by state statute, and there's not much that we can do that would alter that. But in the short term, we do have to come up with these pension payments, and we do need, the more we can invest, the less we have to take out of the investments, the more we've got there to earn, to increase the size of those funds. And I would point out also that when this utility tax was sold, it was sold as to help fund the pensions and also to be used for downtown development. Unfortunately, only 30% of it went into the pensions and 70% of it went into other things. I personally would favor putting 100% of the utility tax in the pension funds, but that hasn't been the will of the council either at the time that it was established or since then. We still have to deal with how we're going to fund these, and I think this is a very, very small increase.
Comments or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
No.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Moving down to reports, Mr. Conzo?
Thank you. You've all received copies of the report that you have there in front of you. I will point out one thing that you'll notice there, particularly in the other accounts, which is everything other than the composite account. The amount there went down considerably. You see there from $4,661,000 plus $3,722,000. If you don't know why that is, that looks kind of shocking. But we have a number of bond payments that are due December 1st and June 1st, and those came up for payment this month. And as a result of that, for example, and we'll talk more about that when I get to the last attachment. We had the sewer bond payment, which is over $600,000. So that's a pretty good size hit to that fund. We're in a lot better position with that, I would add, than we were a few years ago. And I'll talk some more about that as well. The composite account, down a little bit. We did make some payments out of that, too, that were one-time payments or semi-annual payments. And then the investments with IMET, which, of we started out with 500,000 in those investments. It's 548,629. I would point out, for those who don't know this, that those investments are, they've had a fairly good rate of return, and they're also 100% liquid. So in the event that we would need that money to operate, would be able to use that. I know that happened a number of years ago, following the recession that began in 2008, 2009. A lot smaller amount invested. It was invested through Illinois funds. They had to use some of that money when they got a situation where the money was tight. If we need to do that, we would have that money available to do that. But having it invested as it is has resulted in an increase in those funds of $48,000, whereas you would not earn that if we kept it in the composite account. And of course, if we had spent it, it would be gone completely. So we're in a better position with that, I think, as a result of having done that. The attachments, I won't go through each and every one of them. I think they're self-explanatory. If you look at the state income tax receipts there for October, would be the October month of liability, just up slightly, less than 1,000 over last year, but we're doing real well compared to where we were last year, 1,328,000 plus over last year, which was a little over 1,196,000. Looking at the municipal sales tax, there too, we've got an increase there. Not as large of an increase, but still an increase over last year. Interestingly enough, the non-home rule sales tax, which generally follows the same trend as the state sales, the municipal sales tax, non-home rule sales tax generally will be up in proportion to that. Last couple months, it's been down just a fraction. It's not necessarily any reason for alarm. I think what that is the rates are applied differently. So there are certain items, for example, food that's not consumed on the premises, in other words, groceries, stuff like that, that are not taxed under the non-home rule sales tax, but they are taxed. They are subject to taxation from the municipal sales tax. So, maybe it's an indication people are returning to buying groceries here in town instead of buying them out of town. I certainly hope that's the case. In any case, that non-home rule sales tax is down just slightly in the last couple of months. The last thing is a summary of the debts that the city has. I haven't done this in a while, and I thought it would be a good idea, especially for some of you who are newer here, to see exactly what we owe and what it's for. I won't read it line by line, but you see the 4 bonds that we have there. I think it's a self-explanatory report, but you see that, like that first one, that's the existing sewer bond. It was $5,285,000 when we took that out in 2014 to refinance an IEPA loan. It's $640,000 usually per year. That range, $494,100 to $641,625. That $494 is the last year of the bond, which is December of 2023. So there's a smaller balance during that last year, but for the most part, it's more like that $630,000 to $640,000 range. The other one, the next one's the TIF bond. We kick that around a lot in here. We have that obligation until 2034. That bond was issued in 2014. Does have an 8-year call feature if that would be an option that you might want to exercise at that point. The other one, the $3,270,000 alternate revenue bond pertains to the police station. We made a good start at paying that off. It's made a huge difference, I think, in the city by making it possible for us to do that. Well worth the amount of money that we financed there compared to what we were looking at several years ago. And then finally, that last one is the bond that was just issued, that $494,000 bond issue $532,000 principal and interest. It says $494. There's what's called a bond premium, which we'll receive in addition to that. That'll put the total that we'll receive at about $501,000. And the others are loans. They're much shorter term. You can see most of them expire with the exception of that first one. That's the 2008 fire truck, the Quint. It's a no-interest loan through the state of Illinois. It's a $12,500 per year payment, so it's certainly there's no urgency to paying that off ahead of time since it doesn't. We don't pay any interest on that. It was a good deal. Unfortunately, it's not available anymore, but it has a longer term, and it was 20-year loan, and it'll be paid off in 2028. The others you can see are all shorter term than that. That's a typographical error there on that third one. That should be 2025, not 2015. And the rest of it's kind of self-explanatory. I do have asterisk next to a couple of them because the terms of those weren't yet final as of December 13th, which was Friday. One of those we'll have an update for you on, which is the police vehicle loans as we get further detail on that. Any questions on that or anything else in the report?
Okay, thank you very much. Mrs. Bateman?
In the month of November, we received in sewer collection $368,195.08. And again, no payment from either prison for the month of November.
Any questions? Thank you very much. And then department reports either on file or will be shortly. Moving down to new business and communications, we have the approval of motion to rescind previously approved alternate employee health insurance plans that was to be effective as of January 1st, 2020.
Motion approved. Second.
Tracy made the motion, Jeff seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Abstain?
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Approval of alternate employee health insurance plans effective March 1st, 2020.
Move to approve.
Second.
Ron made the motion, Kathy Horn seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Abstain?
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Approval of agreement between the Logan County Tourism Bureau and the City of Lincoln effective January 1st, 2020 and continuing through December 31st, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Steve made the motion, Kathy Schmidt seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Approval of the purchase of 8 new cameras for the police department squad vehicles for an estimated cost of $41,560.
Motion approved. Second.
Kathy, did you second? Okay. Tracy made the motion, Kathy Schmidt seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Do we have any announcements?
Yes.
Val?
So I'll let you know that Comcast is removing its TV Poliona, its Polish language package, as of December 31st, or December 13th, but then it'll be effective for us.
Mr. Keller?
Actually, thank you, Mayor. This relates to that. A couple weeks ago, Johnny Tibbs was here, and she had brought forth some calls that she had received, and she called me again this week saying that she was subject to another hoax from someone posing as Comcast. So she just wanted me to again alert the public that there are some people out there. Be wary of some posers who are out there trying to fraud the public about many things, and this one is Comcast and Infinity.
We have other announcements? Steve?
I think there's still a coyote around, just from what I'm hearing. So still beware of coyote running around town.
Any other announcements? Okay, the next meeting is January 6th, 2020. Merry Christmas to everyone. We have-
Motion adjourned.
Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion, Mr. Keller seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 7:32. Thank you.
Miracle.